Welcome. Today, we're undertaking a very precise examination of one of the world's most enduring cold cases. It's a mystery that's just steeped in code, poetry, and a lot of Cold War paranoia.
It really is. We're talking about the Somerton Man.
Exactly. Our mission here is to conduct a really thorough analysis of this case. We'll look at the initial, frankly, baffling discovery, the cryptic clues, all the confusion over his identity, and then, of course, the dramatic claims of a resolution through modern DNA.
And we want to give you a complete understanding of the known facts. It's so important to be clear on what was actually confirmed, what was just speculation, and what, even now, remains officially open.
It's an unparalleled puzzle, isn't it?
It is, and I think what makes it so captivating is that nearly every single piece of evidence, from the man's physical appearance to the state of his internal organs, seems to point toward a deliberate, almost professional attempt to hide who he was and what happened to him.
The layers of it are just astounding.
They are. The obfuscation is on another level.
The entire mystery, really, is kind of encapsulated by just 4 Persian words. Tamám Shud.
Which translates to, it is over, or it is finished.
And that small phrase became the signature of the whole case. But it wasn't found right away.
No, it took months. It was a tiny scrap of paper, rolled up and meticulously hidden in a special little fob pocket that had been sewn inside the dead man's trousers.
And the significance of those words just gets amplified when you find out where that scrap actually came from.
Right. It was torn from the final page of a very specific book, a copy of the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám.
And the themes of that poetry. It's 11th century Persian poetry.
Yeah.
They're all about mortality, fate, hedonism. It just immediately casts this shadow over the death, suggesting some kind of intent.
Exactly. Either self-inflicted or a message.
We absolutely have to contextualize this moment in history, too. The death occurred on December 1st, 1948. This is right as the global landscape was shifting dramatically.
The Cold War tensions were reaching a fever pitch. The public, the police, everyone was extremely sensitive to anything related to espionage or secrecy.
So you combine that geopolitical anxiety with things like a secret code, the possible use of an undetectable poison, and the fact that authorities just could not identify this man.
And the case immediately blows up. It goes from being a local police matter to a global legend.
It really became a litmus test for the era's fears, didn't it?
It did. Was this a personal tragedy or was it an assassination? And the fact that the police couldn't tell the difference, compounded by this meticulous anonymity, it just suggested something far deeper than a simple unsolved death.
So let's go to the discovery itself. Somerton Beach in Glenelg, South Australia. The body was found at 6:30 in the morning.
And the physical details of the scene were immediately striking, but also contradictory. The man was lying back, his head was resting against the seawall, his legs were extended and crossed.
Almost like he was relaxing.
Almost. A search of his pockets found no ID, but it did yield an unused second-class rail ticket to Henley Beach and a used bus ticket to Glenelg.
But the most unusual detail, and I think it's often overlooked, was a half-smoked cigarette.
Yeah, it was resting right on the collar of his coat. It suggests he hadn't moved since placing it there, or perhaps since he was placed there.
And there were crucial witness sightings from the evening before, November 30th. It's so vital for the timeline.
Absolutely. Around 7 p.m., a couple saw someone who resembled the dead man. They saw him fully extend his right arm and then just drop it limply, a very strange, isolated movement.
And then later.
Another couple saw him between 7:30 and 8 p.m. They even commented to each other that it was odd he wasn't reacting to the mosquitoes, which were apparently terrible that night. They just assumed he was drunk or asleep.
And these witnesses were adamant that the body was in that same distinctive, relaxed position when the police arrived the next morning.
Which led to the initial police theory. He died peacefully right where he sat.
But that initial assumption was heavily challenged later on, wasn't it?
It was. Heavily. In 1959, so over a decade later, a new witness came forward with a completely different account.
What did he say?
This man reported seeing a well-dressed man carrying another man on his shoulders along the beach the night before the body was found.
Wow.
Yeah. This strongly suggested that the body might have been transported or dumped at that location after he was already dead.
That one detail just completely changes the interpretation of the body's relaxed posture.
And the clean state of his clothing. It changes everything.
Let's talk about the victim's physical profile. It was meticulously recorded by the pathologist, John Burton Cleland.
He assessed the man as having a Britisher appearance, aged about 40 to 45, and very notably in top physical condition.
He was a tall man for that time, 5'11".
He was. Gray eyes, fair to ginger-colored hair, a little bit gray around the temples, broad-shouldered, narrow-waisted. But it's the highly specific, unique characteristics that suggest a very particular background or maybe an occupation.
Okay, so what specifically made him stand out physically?
Well, first, his hands and nails showed absolutely no signs of manual labor. This means he certainly wasn't a laborer, a farmer, or a tradesman in the physical sense. He had soft hands.
Suggesting a professional or someone with a sedentary job.
Exactly. Second, and this is one of the most bizarre details, was the structure of his feet. Cleland noted that his big and little toes met in a wedge shape.
A wedge shape.
Yeah. That, along with his pronounced high calf muscles, is often consistent with a dancer, specifically a ballet dancer,
What?
or perhaps someone who regularly wore certain types of boots, like pointed-toe, high-heeled boots.
Which were common in some military or equestrian professions.
Right, so he's this physical specimen with these unique structural traits, suggesting a really atypical background, and yet...
Zero identification.
Precisely. He was clean-shaven, carried no hat, which was highly unusual for a well-dressed man in 1948, no wallet, and every single label had been painstakingly removed from his fashionable clothes.
Which were noted as being of American tailoring.
Right. And the clean removal of the labels was a huge flag for the police. It screamed deliberate anonymity. On top of that, his dental records were unmatchable to any known person. So all the traditional avenues of identification were blocked right from the start.
The medical investigation is where this mystery really pivots. The initial autopsy, it was conducted pretty quickly, estimated the time of death was around 2 a.m. on December 1st.
But what pathologist John Dwyer found internally, it was highly suspicious and deeply confusing, especially given the lack of any external trauma.
What were the findings?
Internally, it was catastrophic, completely inconsistent with a man who just fell asleep and died of natural causes. His heart seemed normal, but there was severe congestion in his pharynx, his gullet, his stomach, with ulceration in the upper digestive tract.
So, serious internal damage.
Very serious. The liver and kidneys were engorged with blood, and his spleen was described as strikingly large, about 3 times its normal size.
And when they looked closer, under a microscope,
they saw more evidence of acute systemic failure, destruction of the center of the liver lobules. This whole pattern, the severe organ congestion and damage, it just screamed acute poisoning.
and they knew his last meal was a pasty.
Right. Eaten roughly 3 to 4 hours before he died.
So if the symptoms were so clear, why did they struggle so much with the toxicology? Was that typical for 1948?
It was, sadly, typical, especially for certain types of compounds. Despite the obvious internal trauma, toxicology tests found nothing. No foreign substances at all.
So Dwyer was convinced it wasn't natural.
He was. He concluded the poison was likely a barbiturate or maybe a soluble hypnotic, something that could be absorbed very rapidly. The crucial finding, though, was that the pasty itself was ruled out as the source.
Meaning the poison had been administered separately.
Exactly.
This complete failure of detection. It really pushed the coroner's inquest, which resumed in June 1949, into this realm of truly sophisticated murder or suicide.
And this is where Professor Cedric Stanton Hicks comes into the picture. He was a renowned expert in physiology and pharmacology.
His testimony was the game changer.
It really was. Hicks described specific classes of drugs, cardiac glycosides, which are compounds derived from plants, and they're notorious for their extreme toxicity in tiny oral doses.
And these drugs would cause the exact symptoms they saw.
Precisely. They attack the heart and the circulatory system, causing rapid systemic failure and severe organ congestion. It matched the autopsy findings perfectly.
And the key mechanism is that they are virtually impossible to detect, right?
Exactly. Hicks explained that these cardiac glycosides, later identified publicly as digitalis and uabane, are notoriously volatile. They break down extremely quickly in the body, especially in a time frame that involved the initial embalming processes they used back then.
So even if investigators had known what to look for, the technology of the time just wouldn't have found it.
They would have struggled immensely, yes.
And these weren't some obscure lab chemicals either.
No, which is why the coroner, Thomas Cleland, insisted on secrecy. Hicks provided the drug names to Cleland on a piece of paper, Exhibit C-18, but they were kept secret from the public until the 1980s.
Why?
Hicks noted these substances were quite easily procurable by the ordinary individual from a chemist without needing to state a reason. Releasing the names would have been a public hazard. It would be like publishing a recipe for undetectable murder.
That decision to suppress the names really underscores how seriously they were taking this poison theory.
It does. And Cleland also added his own observations, which supported the transport theory. He specifically pointed out that the man's shoes were remarkably clean, which was completely inconsistent with someone who'd been wandering around Glenelg all day.
So you put the medical evidence and the physical evidence together.
Cleland's final assessment makes perfect sense. He stated he would be prepared to find the man died from a glucoside poison, non-accidentally administered. He couldn't say if it was self-administered or done by someone else, but he concluded that if the body had been carried to the location, which the clean shoes suggested, then all the difficulties would disappear.
The death was almost certainly unnatural, but the mechanism officially unproven.
While the inquest was trying to solve that medical puzzle, about 6 weeks after the body was found, a whole new set of physical clues just surfaced in a completely different place.
The Adelaide Railway Station cloakroom on January 14th, 1949.
Right. Staff located a brown suitcase that had been checked in after 11:00 a.m. on November 30th, the day before the body was discovered. And just like the man's clothing, the label had been meticulously removed.
And the contents were a strange mix, weren't they?
A very strange, conflicting collection of items. On one hand, you had standard travel gear, a red checked dressing gown, red felt slippers, underpants, pajamas, shaving items.
But on the other hand, you had tools that suggested a very specific technical background.
That's right. They found an electrician's screwdriver, a table knife that had been cut down into a short, sharp instrument, sharpened scissors, and a zinc protective sheath for those items.
And the most telling item.
The stenciling brush, the exact kind used by third officers on merchant ships for stenciling cargo. This suggested the man was either a technical tradesman or, maybe more intriguingly, had a maritime connection.
We also have the observation of sand in the cuffs of a pair of trousers in the suitcase.
Right, which reinforces the idea that he had been on the beach at some point, even if his outer shoes were clean when he died.
But the most powerful piece of forensic evidence, the thing that really linked the suitcase to the man, was the thread.
The unique thread, yes. A thread card of Barber brand orange waxed thread was found inside the case. The police confirmed this was an unusual type that wasn't available commercially in Australia.
And microscopic tests.
They confirmed that this very specific thread matched the thread used to repair the lining of the trousers the dead man was wearing. That cemented the connection between the anonymous body and the unclaimed suitcase.
Let's discuss the Keene anomaly, because that felt like a deliberate act of misdirection.
It's so strange. All the identification tags were removed, yet 3 items, a tie, a laundry bag, and a singlet, had a variation of the name T. Keene, Keene on them, along with 3 different dry cleaning marks.
So the police debated this. Was it a genuine mistake, an overlooked tag?
Or, as you said, a calculated red herring. If the man was trying so hard to be anonymous, leaving a false identity, even by accident, seems counterproductive, unless the name itself was meant to be a distraction.
And the global search for a missing T. Keene turned up nothing.
Fruitless. It felt like a deliberately constructed dead end.
So based on the suitcase check-in time, police developed a speculative timeline for his arrival.
They did. They believed he arrived in Adelaide by overnight train, likely from Melbourne, Sydney, or maybe Port Augusta on the morning of November 30th, 1948.
His actions were quite efficient after that. He bought an unused 10.50 a.m. rail ticket to Henley Beach.
But he never got on that train. Instead, he checked his suitcase at the railway cloakroom sometime after 11 a.m.
And his final known movements before his death took him directly to the scene of the mystery.
Yes. He caught a city bus toward Glenelg. The bus stop he got off at was estimated to be less than a kilometer north of the Mosley Street address that later became so significant. He arrived in the vicinity of Somerton Beach around midday on November 30th and spent the better part of the day there before his body was found.
The narrative takes a major turn here, into almost high-stakes intrigue with the discovery of the Tamám Shud scrap.
Right. The public appeal to find the source book actually worked. It led to the recovery of a rare 1941 edition of the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám, one published in New Zealand.
And the book itself was found in a pretty strange place.
An open-roof car parked in Glenelg. But there is a critical discrepancy in the timeline surrounding this book. One report suggested it was found a week or 2 before the body was found.
If that's accurate, it completely undermines the police timeline that the Somerton Man only arrived 24 hours before his death.
Exactly. It suggests he had been in Adelaide for much longer, possibly waiting for someone or something.
Once the police had the book, microscopic tests verified that the scrap was torn precisely from that last page, which was blank on the back. But the real intrigue was on the inside back cover.
Yes, faint indentations. Clearly made by previous handwriting, they formed 5 distinct lines of capital letters. It looked undeniably like a coded message.
Let's read out the text that was found indented in that book. It was WRGOABABD.
Then the next line was MLIAOIWOGIMPANETP, and that line was struck out.
Right. Then there was an X and MLIABOAIAQC.
And the final line was ITTMTSAMSTGAB.
The structure itself suggests intent, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The fact that the second line is struck out, and it looks a bit similar to the fourth line, suggests a correction, maybe an error in encryption. And there's an X noted above a letter in another line, which could be another modification or a key marker. This wasn't just random scribbling.
And this is where the Department of Defense cryptographers came in. I mean, these were the experts, and yet they failed to decipher it. Why?
Well, the failure really came down to what cryptographers call insufficient symbols. Basically, the total amount of unique text was just too short. You've only got about 40 letters across 5 lines.
Not enough to work with.
Not at all. They reported that providing a satisfactory answer would be impossible. If the code was a complex cipher, like a Vigenère cipher, or even a one-time pad which might have used the Rubáiyát text itself as the key, there just wasn't enough repetitive structure in the coded text to identify the key pattern.
So they ultimately suggested the message could be meaningless or the product of a disturbed mind, which seems like a huge leap. It's almost like they were just dismissing the clue.
I think it was a reflection of their frustration, but modern computational analysis has since refined this theory. Research strongly suggests that the letters are actually the initials of some English text.
So a form of highly condensed shorthand or an acrostic code.
That's the idea.
But if it's shorthand, then it's likely indeterminable without the key, right? You can't just reconstruct the source words from initials alone.
Precisely. If that last line, ITTMTSAMSTGAB, stands for "It's time to move to South Australia Mosley Street," as some people speculate, you would need the person who wrote it to confirm that. The short length and the high probability of it being shorthand, it makes the original text effectively lost forever.
Unless the cipher was something incredibly simple and you had the original book, which was lost.
Right. It just highlights the destructive nature of missing evidence. The physical clue was there, the code, but the key to unlocking it disappeared. The telephone number found in the back of the book, though, that was a gift. Unlike the code, it was concrete. It led police directly to a woman named Jessica Ellen Jo Thompson.
Her name was originally Jessie Harkness. She was a nurse living on Mosley Street in Glenelg, a critical 400 meters from where the body was found.
And her interaction with the police was immediately fraught with suspicion. She denied knowing the man, or why he would be in her suburb, claimed no connection at all.
But she did admit that an unidentified man had tried to visit her earlier in late 1948.
Yes, and that he'd asked her next-door neighbor about her, so that suggests she was, at a bare minimum, a point of interest for the deceased man.
And her reaction when they showed her the plaster cast of the dead man's bust was explosive.
It was. Detective Sergeant Lean described her as completely taken aback to the point of giving the appearance that she was about to faint. She immediately looked away and refused to look at it again.
That is an extreme, visceral reaction. It's almost proof of recognition.
Or at least a very powerful connection. But instead of pressing the issue, the police allowed her to dictate the terms of the investigation.
And this is maybe the single most damaging decision in the history of the entire case.
I would agree. Thompson requested that police not keep a permanent record of her name or release her details. She claimed it would be embarrassing and harmful to her reputation, especially as she was engaged to be married.
And the police agreed.
They agreed. They effectively suppressed the identity of their single most promising witness, turning her into this veiled figure of Jestyn for decades.
She did confirm she'd owned a copy of the Rubáiyát. She said that back in 1945, when she was working in Sydney, she'd given it to an Australian Army lieutenant, Alf Boxall, and signed it Jestyn.
Which led to the brief but intense suspicion that Alf Boxall was the Somerton Man. But he was found alive and well in Sydney in July 1949, and his copy of the Rubáiyát was an intact 1924 edition, so it ruled him out as the victim and his book out as the source of that torn paper.
But even though Boxall wasn't the man, his background only fed the existing narrative.
Oh, absolutely. The combination of removed labels, undetectable poison, and a secret code fueled this persistent speculation that the Somerton Man was a spy.
And the geographic context made that spy theory really sticky.
It did. The death occurred near areas of immense strategic interest to post-war intelligence agencies. You had the Radium Hill uranium mine and the Woomera Test Range military research facility nearby.
And Boxall's background reinforced this.
Right. He was seconded to the North Australia Observer Unit, which was the Special Operations Unit, and he rose in rank very quickly. It just reinforced this idea that Thompson was connected to military or intelligence personnel.
And this theory lingered for decades. It was even supported by later family claims.
That's right. Jessica Thompson's daughter, Kate, claimed in 2013 that her mother did know the man's identity, and that this identity was known at a level higher than the police force.
She also mentioned her mother spoke Russian,
Which just added another layer to the espionage narrative. So for 50 years, the story was almost entirely focused on clandestine activities. The Somerton Man case remained an active puzzle, but it was largely a theoretical one until the early 21st century. I mean, the destruction of crucial items, the suitcase in '86, the original Rubáiyát back in the 50s, it meant that traditional policing had just hit a brick wall.
technology was the only way forward.
It was.
And one of the early attempts, before we really got into DNA, was the H.G. Reynolds theory in 2011. That focused on highly specific physical attributes.
Yes, an anthropologist named Monsieur Henneberg compared the 1949 plaster cast to an ID card for a British seaman named H.C. Reynolds. And Henneberg focused on two very rare anatomical similarities.
The first one was the ear shape.
The ear shape, right. He noted the man's simba, that's the upper hollow of the ear, was significantly larger than his kevum, the lower hollow. This specific ratio is only possessed by about 1 to 2% of the Caucasian population.
That's incredibly specific. And the second identifier.
He found a mole on the cheek in the same position and shape on both the ID photo and the master cast. He called it a unique identifier.
So, while it was never verified by police,
Henneberg stated that based on these extremely rare features, he'd be prepared to make a positive identification in a forensic setting. It was a strong theory, but inconclusive.
but the truly revolutionary information came from the investigations led by Dr. Derek Abbott. And this reframed the entire case, from espionage to, well, a family tragedy.
This is the Thompson family link. Abbott noticed that Robin Thompson, Jessica's son, shared two extremely rare physical traits with the Somerton Man. The first was that unusual ear cartilage structure, the large simba, small cavum ratio.
And the second.
The second was hypodontia, which is a rare genetic disorder where the lateral incisors are missing.
What's the probability of that dual coincidence?
Statistically, the chance of sharing both of those rare traits is estimated at between 1 in 10 million and 1 in 20 million.
Wow.
Yeah. This provided extremely strong, though circumstantial, evidence suggesting that the Somerton Man was Robin Thompson's biological father, despite Jessica's decades-long denial of any deep connection.
It suggested a secret lover, not a spy target.
Exactly.
And this realization spurred the push for exhumation. After years of political refusal, South Australian Attorney General Vicky Chapman finally granted approval in 2019. This was a monumental effort.
A massive undertaking. It was carried out on May 19, 2021, as part of Operation Persevere and Operation Persist. The objective was clear: use modern technology to recover definitive DNA.
And even before the exhumation, they had made some progress.
They had. In 2018, preliminary analysis of hairs retrieved from that 1949 plaster cast had provided mitochondrial DNA, which placed the man in haplogroup H4A1A1A. It's a relatively rare group. Only about 1% of Europeans have it.
So even though the embalming fluid used in 1948 likely degraded a lot of the nuclear DNA, these preliminary steps were already setting the stage for a new technique: investigative genetic genealogy.
Absolutely. The remains were confirmed to be in reasonable condition, and authorities expressed high optimism. They noted that current technology is light years ahead of 1940s techniques.
So they hoped to extract usable samples even from highly degraded bones and teeth.
And that they could bypass the need for direct comparisons and use distant relatives instead.
That optimism proved to be correct. In the summer of 2022, Dr. Derek Abbott, working with the genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, announced a positive identification based on that investigative genetic genealogy.
The man was named as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in Melbourne in 1905. The method they used was groundbreaking for this case. They took the DNA profile derived from the hair strands in the plaster mask and uploaded it to public genealogy databases.
How does that work if you don't have a direct descendant to compare it to?
Well, the process relies on finding distant relatives, third, fourth, even fifth cousins, whose DNA matches the unknown sample. The genealogists then have to manually build these enormous family trees, moving backward in time to find the common ancestors of those distant matches, and then moving forward again to narrow down the possible names.
And for Carl Webb, they found matches on both sides of his family.
They did, on both the paternal and maternal sides, which allowed them to confidently build a family tree that pinpointed him.
It's a remarkable achievement, moving from a single DNA haplogroup to a name and a whole life story. We do have to note, however, that South Australia police have not yet officially verified this result, though they have expressed cautious optimism.
And Webb's biography, once it was uncovered, provides this heartbreakingly human narrative that aligns with so many of the baffling clues. It just removes the need for a complex spy plot.
He was the youngest of 6 children.
Yes, and later retrained as an electrical instrument maker.
And his personal life was filled with significant tragedy right around the time he disappeared.
It was. He suffered major losses during the war. His older brother died as a prisoner of war in Burma in 1943. His nephew died serving with the RAAF in the UK, also in 1943.
Abbott's research suggests he was dealing with severe mental health issues.
Spiraling downward, it seems, after losing 4 close relatives in just 7 years.
His marriage to Dorothy Doff Robertson, a pharmacist, was turbulent.
Very. Doff described him as solitary, moody, violent, and threatening, especially when he was facing setbacks, even over trivial things. It paints a picture of extreme mental fragility.
And critically, Doff provided the link to the poetry.
She did. She confirmed he was fond of verse and wrote poems of his own, and she said, most of them on the subject of death, a detail that is highly consistent with the theme of the Rubáiyát and that final phrase, Tamám Shud.
This all aligns with his history of distress. We know he attempted suicide with an ether overdose in March 1946.
And he subsequently fled his wife in September 1946.
And the geographic link to Adelaide, which puzzled the police for so long, it becomes clear now.
It does. Doff filed for divorce in 1951, but by that time she was reportedly living in Butte, South Australia, which is accessible from Adelaide. Abbott speculates that Webb traveled to Adelaide with a tragic intention of finding his estranged wife.
A desperate final journey.
It seems so.
The confusing keen tags also find a logical, grounded explanation in this new context.
Absolutely. The clothes marked Keene were likely secondhand items that came from his deceased brother-in-law, John Keene, who had American possessions. Since Webb and Keene lived in close proximity, it's highly probable Webb simply acquired some discarded clothes from his late relative. It explains the American tailoring and the confounding tags perfectly.
The conclusion of the Webb claim, though it's still pending official verification, suggests Webb died by suicide by poisoning, a theory consistent with the autopsy findings and Webb's history of mental distress.
The pieces finally fit a deeply sad, personal story, far from the cloak and dagger narrative.
The Somerton Man case, it really stands as this potent example of how technological progress can sometimes, decades later, resolve mysteries where traditional policing failed.
It does. Investigative genetic genealogy solved a riddle that cryptographers and pathologists couldn't touch for 70 years. It really validates the pursuit of cold cases through these modern methods.
Yet it also highlights the persistent gaps that are left when crucial evidence, like the original book, the full autopsy reports, the suitcase contents, was destroyed or lost by the authorities.
And the official ruling on the cause of his death remains inconclusive. That means the precise, tragic mechanism of Carl Webb's demise is still not officially confirmed.
We have to recognize the profound human cost behind this case. This was a man who suffered severe mental health issues and significant personal loss. He was making a desperate final attempt to find his estranged wife, only to be reduced to an anonymous puzzle for 70 years.
His story is one of profound isolation and tragedy.
So if we consider the chain of events, Jessica Thompson, the key witness, concealed her relationship, and the police subsequently lost or destroyed critical artifacts. This raises a really important question for you to consider.
What impact did these immediate human decisions have on transforming what was likely a private tragedy, the death by suicide of a depressed, estranged man, into an enduring worldwide legend of espionage and murder?
It's a powerful reflection on the long-term consequences of investigative choices and suppressed information.
It truly is.
Thank you for joining us for this extensive analysis of the Somerton Man mystery.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening.